how this is going to work tonight, if you would, we're going to ask some questions that the moderators have pre-prepared, and then we're also going to take questions from the audience. Those chairs might be a little close together, but you can spread out as much as you want. We're going to take some questions from the audience. Those questions are going to be received by way of index card. On either side of the stage, on the left and on the right, there are buckets, and next to those buckets are index cards. If you would, at any time, if you have questions that you want to be read from the stage for our panelists, please write those down, drop them in the bucket. They will be collected and given to the moderators and be asked during the question and answer session after their remarks and after they're asked these questions from the moderators. So just do that at any time without being disruptive, if you would, please. Also, too, we just want to thank you for coming out tonight. You have weather to battle against and a Saints game tonight. So we're hoping to get you out. Game starts at 7:15, right? We're hoping to get out about 6:45 and get you to a TV or downtown, wherever you need to go to watch the game. All right, with no further ado, let's ask these questions.
The first question, what endorsements have you received? Mr. Mason, we'll start with you.
Yes, thank you for the question. And I have received a number of endorsements, and I'm going to try to remember all of them. The first one is AFL-CIO, Greater New Orleans. I also have the endorsement of the Alliance for Good Government. I have the endorsement of the New Orleans Coalition, the Independent Women's Organization, Orleans Parish Democratic Executive Committee, Orleans Parish Republican Executive Committee, the Greater New Orleans Republican PAC. I also have the endorsement of the New Orleans East Leadership Organization. Also have endorsement of the several elected officials. I can name those as well. I have an endorsement of Senator Wesley Bishop, Senator J.P. Morrell, Senator Karen Carter Peterson, State Representative Jimmy Harris, State Representative John Bagneris, State Representative Gary Carter, State Representative Royce Duplessis, former State Senator Edwin Murray. I have the endorsement of former State Senator Diana Bourgeois. Trying to see, there's more. And I'll think of the other ones, but there's several others as well. I can speak up.
Thank you. Mr. Perk.
Yes. If you guys don't mind, I'll actually just stand up and talk. It works better than the microphones for me. And I'm trying to think in my head of who I've spoken with that has provided their support. I know that we have the support of former Senator Mary Landrieu, former Congressman Charlie Walsall. We've also received the endorsement of the Independent Women's Organization, IDEA. We've received Women on the Move, and just trying to go through all of them. We also received the endorsement of former City Attorney Sharonda Williams and former federal judges Sally Shushin and Stanwood Duval. I think those are kind of the roundabout, instead of going through every endorsement that I've received, those are the ones that I think most accurately reflect who I am and what my campaign stands for.
Thank you. Mrs. Williams, what endorsements have you received?
I have received from political organizations no endorsements. I don't believe in endorsements from political organizations. However, I have received many endorsements from social justice and social organizations, churches, ministers, and the people. And that's who I think are the ones who should vote and should have to say so. So I have not even sought political endorsements.
Thank you. Mr. Plaisance.
I don't have any endorsements. I think that I'm an independent person. But I do have. Oh, okay, great. But I kind of think that our Lord Jesus Christ endorses. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. The second question is, what is your educational background? Mr. Mason.
Want me to go back to nursery school? I can. I will. But seriously, I am, like I said, I am a product of the Orleans Parish Public Schools. I did matriculate through the public schools. I went to, and I'm going back seriously. I went to Bethany Methodist for my pre-K education. I went to George Washington, which is right down the street, for kindergarten. I went to William Charles Cole Claiborne for elementary school, Francis Gregory Junior High, McDonough 35 Senior High School. There's supposed to be some applause for the Ryan Eagles. Ryan Eagles in the house. I also went to, I went on to LSU for undergrad, and I received a degree in English. Creative writing was my major. I also went on from LSU, went to law school at Loyola Law back in New Orleans. And I also, in addition to my formal education in those respects and my degrees, I also received a certificate, a fellowship certificate from the Institute of Politics at Loyola University.
Thank you. Mr. Perk.
Yes. So you're going to hear from everybody up here, born and raised in New Orleans. I am not. I was born in Thibodaux and raised in Napoleonville. So I went to Assumption High School along Bayou Lafourche. But I did move to New Orleans when I was 17, and I've been here since then. I went to Loyola University, went to Assumption High, then Loyola University undergraduate, and then for law school, and I've been here since.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, what is your educational background?
Well, since I'm proud of my public school education, I will go back as far as Mr. Mason did. I went to Crocker Elementary School, Lawrence C. Crocker. After that, I went to Henry W. Allen. I went to Sophie B. Wright. I went to McDonough 35 High School. I graduated from there. Then I went on to Xavier University, and then I graduated law school from Loyola University, and also went to the National Judicial College for administrative law. I was appointed as an administrative law judge, and that's all.
Thank you. Mr. Playson.
Yes, I went to St. Augustine High School, St. Gabriel. Then Xavier University. And then I went to Southern University, Los Angeles, and Baton Rouge. I have a master's in employment law from the John Marshall School of Law in Atlanta. So I know discrimination and what have you. I was also National Institute of Child Advocacy. Using that organization that I've talked about before.
Thank you. The next question is, describe yourself and indicate what makes you uniquely qualified for the office. Mr. Mason.
Go ahead and stand up as well. Yes, what makes me uniquely qualified for this position is that I have been actively and exclusively practicing in the civil law arena for my 19 years of practice. I also believe that a good judge requires more than just a good educational background and a proven track record in the legal field. I have been successful in my practice. I practiced on both sides of the aisle, plaintiff's work and defense work, all in the civil arena. But what makes me uniquely qualified is my leadership outside of the practice of law. I am the national advocate or chief legal advisor of the Knights of Peter Claver organization, which is the world's largest African-American Catholic lay organization in the world. I also serve as the philanthropy committee or the outreach committee chair for the New Orleans chapter of the Federal Bar Association. I also have served as the past chapter president of the Sigma Lambda chapter, which is the Greater New Orleans alumni chapter of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And I can name various other organizations that I've served, not only just as a dues-paying member, but as an active leader in those organizations. And I believe those leadership roles and those active roles in the community service work we do, the outreach we do, the mentoring programs we do to give back to the community is key. I didn't know lawyers when I was growing up. My family didn't have a family lawyer to go to. I had to kind of find out as much as possible on my own as to what I should major in, things of that nature. I was fortunate to be the first person in my immediate family to graduate from college, and followed by my older brother a few years later. But I'm very proud of where I come from and what I've accomplished, but I'm also aware of the fact that I didn't get to where I am on my own. And it requires a community, it requires others to help you. Once you get to where you're supposed to be or where you want to be, it's required for you to reach back and give back. And sitting on the bench calling balls and strikes is not my intent to just do that. I plan to be right here back in the community, as I've always been in the community, trying to get feedback from the community as to how we can better our system together. So that's what makes me uniquely qualified in this position, to hold this position. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burke.
I think that to talk about what makes us uniquely qualified for the position, you have to hear a lot about who we are. And something that I've come to learn through campaigning throughout the city is we all make snap judgments about people. And we make snap judgments by the way they dress, by the way they talk, the way they act, and who they hang out with, what part of town they live in. And I've heard so many different things about so many of us, the candidates that we see before us. And one of the things that I've heard is this: I am a privileged man of Buckhannon. So what can I possibly know about Civil District Court, about the people that appear before it? And that's not my story, and that's not my life. And so what makes me different are my life experiences. And as I said before, I grew up in Napoleonville. I grew up poor. I grew up in a very small town, in a small house. I'm the oldest of four. I remember when I was about in 5th grade, my mom decided she was going back to school. And when she did so, she decided at a time that my father's business had gone under. Yes, she was going to raise 4 children, have a full-time job, be a full-time student, commute 1 hour each way to Baton Rouge, while my dad was working 12 to 14-hour days to keep the lights on. I remember those conversations. I remember them talking about whether they were going to buy groceries or they were going to buy books. And I remember some of the give and take of, well, maybe she could find some out-of-date textbooks, and then we could only have half the money for books. That's what you do. And unfortunately, that's not an uncommon story in the city of New Orleans. And it's not an uncommon story around the country. That's who we are. And what makes me different are parts of those life experiences. And those are what I would bring to the bench. Because while we do make snap judgments, someone walks in, everybody has a story. And unless I stood here and just said this, you wouldn't know my story. You wouldn't know my story unless you asked, or I just said. And what I'll tell you is, as your next judge, I'll ask you your story. I want to know your story. Because without that, I cannot make a decision. And I cannot understand where you are coming from or what you need. In addition to that, my major concern with this bench, this particular seat that we're talking about, is this is what's called that rotating seat. I don't know if you guys know about this, but it means the most junior judge, the baby judge, hears domestic cases until the next junior judge comes in. All of you are here on a Saints night in the rain, which means you're the ones that pay attention to politics. So you know how many new judges we have had recently. Civil District Court has had 5 new judges since 2017, 22 months. That's 5 new judges. That means 5 different judges have touched this document, which means people that are going in on a domestic case and a custody case, maybe on judge number 2, 3, 4, or 5, and now they're looking at judge number 6. And any of you who have ever had a project at work, you don't have to be a lawyer to understand this. A project at work, how long does it take you to catch up on the project, to find out what you're doing? Can you imagine by the time you figure it out, 3 months later you're out? They put somebody else in there. I'll make you a pledge, because what I do is domestic work, day in and day out, is I'll stay there for 2 years, regardless of when the next judge comes in. Because people need relief, and their cases need to move, and they need to know where their children are sleeping. That's my difference. That's my story. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Williams.
The difference with me is that a lot of people, they talk about community service, they talk about what they do. I have actually lived it. In my 22 years of practice, I started off doing mass tort litigation But before that, in law school, I worked for the death row inmates, sort of like the Innocence Project, to get men off who they, felt through DNA were innocent. But I have not worked for corporate corporations. I haven't worked for insurance company. I work for organizations. I've done fair housing work. I have done civil rights work. I have fought out in the community. That Butler can tell you, I've worked for Acorn while President Obama was working in Chicago. I worked in New Orleans. We work for people in the streets. Every month, I would go to 5 different homeless shelters and battered women's shelters. I went to the Oz. I went to the Mission. I went to the Hope Haven. I went to the battered women's shelter on the Pullman. I also went to the one on Barone Street. And what we did, and I was a part of Unity for the Homeless. I've been in so many civic organizations, the League of Women Voters, so many community organizations. You have to really look at my website to really see it. But I have not just talked the talk, I've walked the walk. For 15 years, I've done legal aid work. I worked for the Pro Bono Project. I was the only staff attorney who handled the cases. I wrote grants for juvenile court so that they could hire an attorney in juvenile court. And I also worked with a lot of domestic. This is going to be domestic C. And if you go to Civil District Court, just run my name through the computer, you will see hundreds, if not thousands of cases that I have done. And 25 cases in a day, or maybe more, I would take. So I left a high-paying, firm job to have a low-carbon paying job. And the way I was able to make it, because I was my husband, ex-husband was an attorney. So I was able to afford to not, make a lot of money, because you don't make a lot of money being a pro bono or nonprofit attorney. But we did good work. We did work for the disabled people. We did work for the children. We did work for the community. So I have been in the newspaper for my work with the disabled. I was just recently, I was a keynote speaker for the Department of Veteran Affairs because I was with the veterans. I felt Women's Month, I was the only woman picked in the whole city to be the keynote speaker. I've been signed by the city business. They also honored me as being the only woman doing solo practitioner work for homeless and poor people. I did work for free. So I'm not just talking about what is, doing community service. I've done it. This has been my life. And this is what I continue to do. And as a person, I want to serve the bench, to serve the people. Because I know what it's like. I've been a lawyer. I've been a judge. I've been a community person. And that's what makes me qualified.
Thank you. Mr. Playson.
What makes me uniquely qualified is that I have 28 years experience as an attorney. Like I said, I was a person that got an L&M in employment law. So I know discrimination, retaliation. I started out in discrimination cases. And so I bring that difference to the judgeship. But my passion for this city and also my lifetime experience, my experiences as a person in the city. My father and mother had a nursery and a grocery store, and so I had community involvement there. I used to call cards at the municipal auditorium. I did just about everything. If you take a look at my resume. And so I think that makes me qualified. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm reminding the audience that there are no cards on either side of the room for you to write your personal questions on. To all candidates, how do you define fairness? Mr. Mason.
Fairness, thank you for the question. Fairness is when everyone has a level playing field to start. That's number one. Number two is that everyone has an equal opportunity to get impartial and unbiased service from their public servants. In this context, since we're talking about a race for a judicial election, we're talking about a race to become a public servant. And so that's what fairness is. Fairness is about making sure that somebody is on this bench who's treating everybody equally, comes there regardless of the status social status, economic status, or political status, or otherwise. And that's what fairness is, to give everyone an even hand opportunity for justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kirk, how do you define fairness?
I think Mr. Mason's absolutely correct that when you talk about fairness, you talk about a level playing field. Unfortunately, as you all know, we don't have a level playing field. That's not how our system and our society is structured. And so I think when you're talking about fairness, it's taking each individual and taking them for who they are and the product of where they're from. And specifically, and the reason I'm having trouble putting into words, I'm putting in the context of a child custody case, and very often I have heard someone say, well, mom doesn't have enough money, so obviously the dad should have custody because mom can't provide. There's no sin in being poor. There's no sin in being rich. And I think that when we talk about fairness, we talk about what's in the best interest and what's appropriate and what's in the common good. So I think when we talk about fairness, that's how we have to look at it. While there may not be a level playing field, there's certainly a way to look at it, to interpret it, to make sure that you're providing a level playing field. And I think that's what you need to do. I'm currently a commissioner on the Louisiana Commission on Human Rights, where what we do is we enforce the anti-discrimination laws and policies of the state of Louisiana. And we very often have to do that because we have to find out what level playing field are we in and how do we bring people into that field to make sure that everyone is treated equally and fairly.
Thank you. Ms. Williams.
Fairness to me is treating everyone who comes in the courtroom as the same, not treating someone differently because your attorney gave the judge money for their campaign or you worked out a certain endorsement. People expect favors for certain judges when they give you money, give you endorsements, but that's fairness to me is treating everybody the same no matter what. No matter who was giving money, who gave to your campaign, and also treating everybody with the same respect no matter their sex, creed, color, skin, their sexual orientation, or just being fair with everyone. That's fairness to me.
Thank you. Mr. Playson.
Fairness, and I agree with fairness. But I think that fundamental fairness is what I'm about. Like I said, I was an attorney, and I went through discrimination in employment law. So you have to know what fairness is, and you could go. I'm cited in Atlanta, federal supplement, and I went through the process of discrimination. And so you've got to know fundamental fairness from that process. Discriminatory intent, how do you prove that? Retaliatory intent, how do you prove that? Anti-discrimination statutes, Louisiana statutes. So I know all about that. But I went through it, and so I know fundamental fairness is.
Thank you. This question is for all candidates. How can you support grassroots leadership as opposed to top-down leadership? Mr. Perk?
How do you support?
Grassroots leadership as opposed to top-down leadership.
I think grassroots leadership, you're looking at the basic community leaders. And that's what we're looking at here. Is this organization is an organization of grassroots leadership. And you're the people that are in the community day in and day out. You're not the people in D.C. You're not the people with the big money behind you. And I think it's a lot of, in support of them from the bench, is going out into the community, speaking with organizations, talking to them about what's available, what's not available, what the court can do, about what's available to help self-help desk. So I think it's about community involvement more than anything else.
Ms. Williams, how can you support grassroots leadership as opposed to top-down leadership?
You support grassroots leadership by being active in the community, such as I am. You have to go out and meet the people. You have to go to the organizations. You have to become a member. You have to join. Just like I just joined a group called Mom Demand Action after the St. Louis shooting. We're trying to stop the sexual assault against women. So those are all getting more mass shootings in schools. So you have to really join organizations someone who can speak for them, such as a politician or a judge, I think that would help.
Thank you. Mr. Plaisance.
I agree with Candace. Just getting out there and being with the people. Community involvement. Those are the things that I've been doing. But the only thing that I can say is that be out there and be with the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mason.
How do we promote grassroots leadership? We have to start from the beginning. We have to start from just like any other problem we have in the community that we see with respect to crime, poverty, etc. We have to start by teaching our young from the beginning how to conduct themselves in a communal environment. So we can teach them leadership roles, teach them how to give back to the community from the beginning, so that when they grow up as adults, they're giving back to the community. So that's how we can promote it, by creating our future leaders, the educational process, the public educational piece, civic engagement, promoting civic engagement, teaching them not taking civics out of the classes, out of schools, which has been done before, not taking that education out of the schools. So unfortunately, the situation we're living in now, we're seeing what top-down leadership does. Going on in our country now, we see what the effects of top-down leadership is, and it's a mess. Quite frankly, there's the elephant in the room is that we have problems on a national level, and it trickles down. So we can promote that by creating our future leaders. That's number one. Number two is being that servant leader. Being servant leaders, not just leading from the front, not just doling out orders, but being somebody who's getting in there, rolling up your sleeves and being part of the ranks, leading from the front line, leading from the sideline, leading from the back line, on all levels. When people see you, especially children, they emulate what you do, what they see, how you talk, how you walk, how you conduct yourselves, and that's how we can promote future grassroots leadership, by showing our children and those who come behind us what it takes to give back to the community and not just take for granted where they come from. And so that's one thing. That's my life story is not taking for granted where I come from. That's why I donate so many pro bono and hours to teaching law students. And I'll be quite frank with you. I teach at Tulane Law School and Loyola Law. I teach skills courses. I taught at LSU Law Center, because I was the only African American male to graduate in my class in 1999 at Loyola Law School. That's ridiculous. That I was the only African American male to graduate in 1999 from my law school, Loyola University, as long as Loyola University has been around. And that's what we're dealing with. So, what type of person would I be if I did not go back and reach back to those current law students at Loyola to show them that positive image to look at? Who would I be if I would not go to Tulane Law School, where there's a big disparity in the number of law students that are African American who look like me? If I'm not standing up there with the top-notch lawyers in the city, the other top-notch lawyers in the city, but none of whom look like me, who would I be if I did not provide that example for them? I donated over 100. We're only required to have 12.5 continuing legal education hours a year in Louisiana, 15 in Texas. I'm also licensed in Texas. And they're concurrent hours. So if I get 15 credit hours of volunteering, going to continuing legal education courses or teaching courses, then I'm good for the year. I had over 110 hours last year volunteering my time. And that's not the only reason why I'm running for judge, because I'm spending more time doing work. I'm not making money when I'm doing that. But that's so important to me that I'm compelled to give back in that respect. And that's what we need to do to promote future leadership, grassroots leadership, and not just top-down leadership. You have to start from the ranks and not start from the top to get to where you should be.
Thank you. The next question is, where do you stand on police consent decrees? Ms. Williams, we'll start with you. decrees?
As in the,
The question just says, where do you stand on police consent decrees?
okay, well, as far as if you're talking about with the position as, oh, you can't hear me? Oh, I'm sorry, police consent decrees really will not be a part of the, domestic docket. So that's why I'm a little bit confused. I really don't know how to answer that question on this, I'm being honest, because this is a domestic docket that will basically handle the board's child custody, child support. And one thing I did want to mention, I know Mr. Perk was talking about, he would want to say 2 years, but the legislature changed it to where, because it was revolving so much, that you would have to stay 6 years into the position because it has been revolving. But as far as consent decrees with police, it will not be within the divorce or child custody, child support, and the position that we're running.
Thank you. Mr. Plaisance?
Police consent decrees.
Decrees, yes.
You know, I have a good background in that because I used to represent the black organization of police. And they came out with the consent decree in 1975 first, and then they came out with another one just recently in 2000. My position on it is anything that would make the community safer from police brutality, anything that is fundamentally fair to police officers as well. I just recently had a civil service matter that I litigated, and so fundamental fairness to the police officer and also the community. And that's what I think that the consent decree should have.
Thank you. Mr. Mason?
Yes, I too am a little bit confused by the question with respect to police consent decrees and in particular, like their relevance in this particular context. Even though I know that when you have a consent decree, it's basically like a consent judgment. It's like an agreed plan of action in lieu of ongoing litigation or whatever. So, with respect to the police consent decree, I know we had one in effect during the Landry administration, and it was a lot of back and forth in that respect. But the bottom line is whatever's in the best interest of the people as a whole, as far as providing the necessary protection, and also as far as the police officers are concerned, as far as making sure that our police officers are properly paid and that they have the proper benefits so that they can have some incentive to do their jobs, which is protecting our community. So as long as those are moderated to the extent that they're not just promoting one side over the other, as long as we make sure that the consent decrees are in order and enforceable and not be a political ploy to create contention between two political subdivisions or two subdivisions within those political subdivisions, such as the City of New Orleans and the New Orleans Police Department. So, like I said, a lot of them arise out of lack of benefits, failure to pay benefits to police officers. We had something with the firefighters, as we know, with the money owed to the firefighter retirement. But the bottom line is what's in the best interest of the city, the public as a whole, and not just something that's beneficial to the city itself as a governmental entity or the police department. So as far as I'm concerned, is as long as it's fair and everything is in the best interest of the people and the people do not suffer because of these consent decrees, then that's my position.
Thank you. Mr. Perk?
That has to be the most complex question anyone is going to ask here tonight. So there are currently two consent decrees that are in place. One is with the NOPD and the other is with the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office. And both are being monitored by compliance officers appointed by federal judges at the Eastern District. To the extent of my position, how I feel about them, I think that at the time the consent decrees were entered, they were absolutely so distrusted that people didn't want to call for help. So to the extent of did we need them and do I believe in them? Yes. I think we needed the consent decrees. I think they served their place. I think we have a long way to go before we reach full compliance and before the people of New Orleans feel safe with the NOPD and the Sheriff's Office monitoring themselves. I'm sure most of you know that just like Jefferson Parish was under a consent decree called the Dandridge Decree, which required integration in our schools, that was entered in 1964. They were not released from that until 2008. So they were under a monitoring and compliance officer since that time, and now there's a new compliance officer that sits there to make sure that they are in compliance and don't have to go back to court to go back under a consent decree again. So the consent decree itself is, obviously that's what's running the day-to-day operations of these facilities. And I think until we reach a point where the citizens of New Orleans feel safe, and the citizens, because these are our agencies. They're not for the government, they're for us. And so until we feel safe with them, until we understand them, until we have full transparency, I think we need them. I think that as we comply with them, certain provisions should be removed so that we can actually come to full autonomy again.
Thank you. The next question is, have you handled domestic cases? Mr. Plaisance.
Yes, I have. I've handled divorce cases, some child support cases, visitation, just recently, not recently, but I have handled them. So I know that professionally and personally as well. Yeah, I have handled them. Thank you.
Mr. Mason, same question.
I have handled some domestic cases throughout my career, my 19-year career, particularly early on when I did more of a general civil practice. As far as these forums are concerned, we have an opportunity to educate the public about what's going on with our court system. I just want to clarify that, first of all, this seat is for an unexpired term, to serve an unexpired term, which is about 2 years or so left on the term from a judge, the untimely passing and unfortunate passing of Judge Claire Jupiter. So this is the seat that was held by Judge Claire Jupiter, and the governor called a special election to serve out the last of that term. So with respect to the current rotation, there are 2 permanent domestic dockets in the Civil District Court bench. Those 2 dockets, those 2 divisions those seats are currently held by 2 permanent domestic judges who, of course, have to be subject to re-election when their term expires. So there's Judge Bernadette D'Souza holds 1 seat, and Judge Monique Barrial holds the other seat. The 3rd seat, as Mr. Perk mentioned, is called what they refer to as the swing seat. So the newest judge on the bench will take over the domestic docket overflow, so to speak, from the other 2 divisions. So they will be handling domestic relations until a new word judge is elected. And as of right now, that projection is more likely than not going to be in 2020. So that's the current status of the Civil District Court bench. This is not a permanent domestic seat we're running for, so I just want to take the opportunity to clarify that. I know that's been referred to as a family court seat. This is not a family court seat. It will take on a family docket for that limited time until a new word judge is elected. The current judge who's handling the family docket, who's in that swing seat, so to speak, is the newest elected judge, who is Judge Ellen Hazura. Once this election is over and the new judge takes the bench, then that judge will take over the domestic docket from Judge Ellen Hazura until a new word judge is elected at some unforeseen time in the future, but more likely than not, it will be the year 2020, once other judges begin to roll off the bench due to retirement requirements itself. So I just want to clarify that for the record. Once that term is over, it will roll into a general civil law docket. That general civil law docket deals with contracts. It deals with automobile accident cases, personal injury type cases, any type of injury cases that fall within the state court jurisdiction. Also, complex litigation, class actions, toxic tort cases, multiple party litigation cases, and that's where I have the bulk of my experience in handling. So you can't have somebody who's just well-versed in domestic relations and domestic law to take over that complex docket once it turns over in a couple of years. So I just want to clarify that for the record, that yes, it is a domestic seat initially, but it will convert to a regular civil district court docket handling all types of civil matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perk.
I'd say about half of my practice, more, about 60% is domestic law. I had a status conference this morning, and I was talking to one of my clients as I drove over here. I'm also qualified as a civil law mediator, which means I get appointed by the judges at Civil District Court to hear cases regarding child custody and child support. Specifically, what looks like it may be a low conflict case, the judges have at their discretion the ability to appoint a mediator who's been qualified by the state of Louisiana to hear those cases. I'm on that list. I get appointed. And I think that it gives me a unique perspective because it is one of those where you can step back and you look at the chessboard. And most of the time in these domestic cases, and I can look out into the audience and say you've all been touched by a domestic judge. Whether it's been you, your neighbor, your siblings, your children, you know someone who's been in front of a domestic judge, so you know what it's like to want someone who's going to sit back and listen to everybody and listen to those cases. I can tell you that that's what I do day in and day out. In addition to that practice, I do practice in mass tort litigation as well, and I'm a member of a plaintiff steering committee for a toxic tort in federal court. And I handle all of those. But the point is, when we're talking about this, while it is, yes, there's an end to this domestic docket, I think it's important that the person that takes this domestic docket hits the ground running. Because you're talking about people's everyday lives. And that's not to mean that a car accident isn't important. It is. And a contract dispute is important. But knowing where your children are, that takes on a whole new level. And knowing what's going to happen with your sons and your daughters, that's in every fiber of your being. So yes, and to answer your question, I practice substantially in domestic law. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Williams.
Out of my 22 years of practice, I would say that, oh boy, maybe I'd say 18 years of that has been domestic. I've done pretty much everything you can imagine except bankruptcy, but working with the Pro Bono Project, doing a lot of stuff with legal aid, which is SCLC, working with Acorn Alerts. A lot of my practice was domestic. And so, like I said, if you go to CDC, run my name, you'll see hundreds, if not, I don't even know, maybe thousands domestic cases that I have done. And so I have done many trials, domestic, which is divorce, child custody. I've done many child custody, child support, and it's been a big part of my practice, but I've done a lot of other things too. I've done breast implant, custodial tobacco litigation, mass tort, the tort. I have done a lot of trial work, and that's another thing. When you do domestic, people think that you just go before the judge. You know, sometimes you have it's a bench trial that you have to do divorces. So I've done, but not only that, a lot of personal injuries has been one of the things that I've done to help my ex-husband in his practice. I've done a trial for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And not only that, I've been, like I said, on the defense of working with criminal organizations to help people, you know, get off of either death row or meet the sentence. So I've done pretty much some of everything. But as far as, again, domestic, it has been a substantial part of my practice. And just to let you know, when I had left the Pro Bono Project when I was appointed to be an administrative law judge, we had 1,900 cases open, 1,900 cases, and that's domestic. And it was in Orleans, Jefferson, and I think we had some in Covington and some in St. Bernard. But that's just to show you how many people in the communities need to help that cannot afford an attorney. And so that goes to show you how much work I was doing. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is to all candidates. Why do you believe judges should be elected rather than appointed with the endorsement of local bar associations? Mr. Mason.
Great question. Actually, I am, during this particular campaign, during this election, the New Orleans Bar Association did a poll of its lawyers and members, and those who participated in the poll, despite the fact that there are four of us in this race, 52% of my colleagues in the New Orleans Bar have just determined that it's of their opinion that I am the most qualified candidate in this particular race to serve. So as far as my peers are concerned, yes, for me it would be great if they had a merit-based or peer-based selection process. However, it's important. I would not choose that process because it's more important that the people in our community, the people as a whole, elect our public servants. Judges are public servants. Yes, it's important. It's great to have the support of your peers and colleagues who can vouch for you and vouch for your character, vouch for your professionalism, vouch for your ethics and the type of attorney you are. And I have earned that respect from my peers. I have earned the designation of an AV rate. I am an AV rated attorney. That's a peer review system that's in place by an organization, Martindale Hubbell. Martindale Hubbell, I am AV rated, which is the top rating you can get. And that's a peer review process by other attorneys and folks in the legal profession who rate their colleagues. I also have been recognized by the super lawyers. I've been designated as a super lawyer that's another peer review process that you're invited to join the ranks of super lawyers if you fall within the top 5% of attorneys within your in the region, in your state. So I have been selected as a super lawyer for the past 4 or 5 years. That's a peer review process. So like I said, as far as I'm concerned, I do have the support and the respect and admiration of my peers. However, the bottom line is we're public servants, and we're out there to serve the public. The judge has to serve the public, and so it's the public's choice to determine who they want to elect for judge. Now, is it important to adhere to or to listen to what colleagues have to say? Yes. Public education is important. That needs to go out there. It needs to be out in the public. Public education, civic engagement is important. Forums like this to give the public the opportunity to meet the candidates and see them face to face and interface with them, interact with them. That's important. But of course, we know the dangers of a merit-based system because people don't play by the rules, right? We know that folks don't play by the rules, and we know that there'll be even more disparities as far as qualifications and experience is concerned, and having unqualified, unexperienced individuals put in places just because of their political connections. And I'm completely against that. So the system that we have in place, though it's not perfect, it is a fair system, and I believe in that system, and I respect that system. And that's why I'm out here trying to convince the public that I am the candidate of their choice, that I should be the candidate of their choice for this particular position. And I have faith in the public in making that decision. And so I look forward to that in this particular race, and thank you for that question. That's a great question.
Thank you. Mr. Burke.
Like Mr. May said, I'm 80 rated. I've been named in Super Lawyers magazine. I've been named by New Orleans magazine as a top lawyer. 2 years ago, I was top 40 under 40, although I have aged out of that, unfortunately. And this year, I was received a lifetime membership to Best Attorneys in America. But what's better as far as appointed judges to elected judges? There are good give and takes on both sides. What I look at is whenever we're talking about the appointed judges are the ones that at the end of the day have made the hard decisions for the United States, for our city, and for our state. The segregation laws are knocking down the segregation laws, came out of federal court of appointed judges. When you're dealing with Planned Parenthood and the attempts to defund Parenthood throughout different states, those are all stopped by federal courts. And the question is, why are they stopped by the federal courts? And it's not specifically that we're only dealing with federal issues. It's that judges don't have to face political ramifications. They don't have to worry about re-election, so they can sit and make those hard decisions. Because they don't have to worry about somebody coming to take their paycheck away. So they can sit, they can hear it, and they can determine what actually is applicable by law. Now, on the converse side, is that the people, the general public, feel like they don't have a voice in the judicial system. And so the question is there some type of mechanism where we can have both? Some states have done that. And I think, and I'm trying to remember one that I was looking at, I believe it was Massachusetts, allows for the governor to appoint judges to fill an unexpired term. And that's merit-based. And so they would fill an unexpired term when a judge leaves for any particular reason, but then they would have to come up for re-election. And so I think that's something that we can look at as well. Now, other states, including Texas, has the Bar Association provide ratings for each judicial case and will then provide that ranking to the general public. I think that's something that should be important as well. Just so you guys know, the general public and the voting population understands who these lawyers are. Because very often you don't know this. And so it's important that you know what our peers think of us and how we behave and what is our temperament. Is one better than the other? I think they both have their pros and they both have their cons. I think here in the state of Louisiana, we have reached a point where people enjoy getting to know their judges. And they like knowing that we can hold you accountable. And I think that's important. I've spoken about transparency a couple of times, and I think it's important that the citizens of New Orleans understand what the judges do. And yeah, if it looks like we're doing things converse or not in the best interest of our state, that you guys do hold us accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Williams.
Thank you. All of the judges in the local courts, like civil court and criminal court, are elected. Some of them, because some of them have been appointed, but you don't know. The federal judges are appointed by Washington, D.C. And I believe that, I myself, believe it or not, was appointed to be a federal judge. It was by committee, Schumer, the Judicial Committee in Washington, D.C. They sent the information out of Maryland, which Sherry had picked someone, but saying all that to say is that in New Orleans, the only problem that I have with elected as opposed to endorsements, a lot of people don't know you have to pay to be endorsed. They just don't endorse you and put out the literature for free. You have to pay. And when you have to pay a lot of money. And that money can go towards your campaign. And I feel like if you have to pay for a political organization to endorse you, are they endorsing you or are they endorsing you because you have the money to pay? So that's the problem that I have in New Orleans. But I really do think that it's just that people should get to know more about judicial judges, what we do, what they do. And I think we should have more forums like this. Because if we did, people would understand what we really do because they think that, oh, if they're endorsed by this person or that person, they're qualified. That's not true. And like they said, yeah, I've gotten the AV rating. I've been a super lawyer. I've gotten all that. But you know what? You have to pay for it. It's not free. It's not free. To get those plaques and to be a super lawyer, they charge you money. Everything you have to pay for money. But when the people go out and vote, that is free. So I believe that it's the system should just be where some people are elected without saying that they're endorsed by this person or that person, and so the people make the decision not going on an endorsement because, like I said, it's not free. You have to pay for it.
Thank you. Mr. Plaisance.
Made very little money from it, but it was my contribution to rebuilding our city.
Thank you. Ms. Williams.
Hurricane Katrina changed a lot for me. When I said I was appointed to be a judge by the governor, and it happened before Katrina, and then Katrina happened. So then I went, all the judges that were in the state of Louisiana had to come back and go to some part of Louisiana to practice. I chose to go to Shreveport. And I went to Shreveport, and there was an opening, so I was administrative law judge in Shreveport. But how Katrina impacted my life is that it did put my practice on hold. The reason why I'm no longer an administrative law judge, I had to resign. And I had to resign because I was in a car accident. I was hit on my way going to work. And actually this beautiful young child you see right here, my son, I was hit and I was 25 weeks pregnant, still working. And he was born at 1 pound, 10 ounces at 26 weeks. So I had to resign as being a judge, and that's why I was no longer a judge. And they said, well, you can just work with anything else you want to at that time. So, and it changed my life because I had to put my life on hold. I took care of him. He was, a preemie. And he was in the hospital up until, he was born in June. He got out in like September. And so I put my practice on hold for about a year and a half. My mother stayed with me. I myself had problems with my lungs. I couldn't walk. I mean, Katrina impacted me, but I came back strong. I came back to New Orleans. I left Shreveport once he was little with a heart monitor. And then took care of my son. And then I went right back to work at the Pro Bono Project. And but Katrina did impact my life.
Thank you. Mr. Playson.
Katrina impacted my practice was a striving practice before Hurricane Katrina. I used to do a lot of TV commercials and so forth, but when Katrina happened, all my clients dispersed. And so I had to start all over, So I practiced in Texas for a little while. And then I had to rebuild in New Orleans. Rebuild the grocery store that my dad and my mom built. I had to rebuild about 10 properties that my mom and dad built. So yeah, it impacted tremendously on my practice. But I was able to come back. So yeah, Katrina was a bad thing. It really negatively impacted my practice.
Mr. Mason.
Yes, they bring back bad memories. But Katrina, all of us who lived through Katrina, of course, Katrina did have a direct impact on my entire life, including my practice. I was with a small law firm at the time. Katrina came. My wife and I, who's in the audience here with the Drew Brees shirt on, who that? But my wife and I, we didn't have our children. We didn't have our 2 daughters at that point in time. We had just built a house, our first house in New Orleans East, and we had to evacuate, of course, for Katrina. We initially evacuated to Dallas, Texas, and we ended up in Houston, Texas, and we made Houston our home for a while. One thing that Katrina taught me as far as lessons learned from Katrina is resilience and the value of our experience and our background. We ended up in Houston, Texas with a half bag full of clothes, summertime clothes, not business suits, not anything. And my wife and I, we ended up living with relatives in Houston for a little while. But I immediately, despite what was going on here, despite the fact that we learned that we had about a good 6 feet of water in our house in New Orleans East, we lost virtually everything we owned and had to start all over again. It taught us the importance of having one another. It taught us the importance of having our education, having what we had that can't be taken away from us. That's one thing that Katrina did teach us as far as lessons learned are concerned. But without hesitation, I started looking for employment. We learned that my wife was pregnant, and we ended up having our daughter in Houston, Texas. We had both of our daughters in Houston, Texas. We made Houston our home. We had a nice life in Houston. I ended up getting my Texas license and picking up the ball from there. I was fortunate enough to get some contract work, doing some document review, etc. Until my Texas license was, while my application process was going through, which took about a good 5 or 6 months for them to process the application. And I was fortunate enough to get hired on, just being in the right place at the right time. and I got on with a firm out in Houston, and immediately got right back into the practice of law, just in Texas, a whole new jurisdiction. But at some point in time, my wife and I, both being from New Orleans, we sat there and we made a conscious decision to move back to New Orleans because we really knew that New Orleans needed us more than perhaps we needed New Orleans at the time. New Orleans without New Orleanians and young African-American New Orleanians, to be blunt, would not be New Orleans. We love the culture. We love the fact that we grew up in this culture, and we wanted our children to experience this culture. And since we've been back, I've been fortunate to have gainful employment, get on with law firms, and be promoted up the ranks in those law firms. But one thing we learned is that we never missed a beat, and we never missed a beat along the way. We just got right back in like we had never left. And Houston is literally a blur now, because that's, we know we made the right decision to come back home. So yes, Katrina did impact us, but it was a strong lesson learned. It taught us about resilience, and it taught us about the important things, not what we have on, not what kind of clothes we have, because we didn't have any. I had to buy $60 suits to go to interviews. So we made do with what we had, and we survived. And so Katrina taught valuable lessons. As bad as Katrina was, as much as we lost in Katrina, we gained a lot as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Our final question of the forum is, what does Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court mean for justice? Ms. Williams.
Kavanaugh. I feel like I am going through a lot of things with Kavanaugh. What it means is that we need to start voting first of all. Because if it were not for the people voting who's in office right now, we would not be going through Kavanaugh, all the other scandals and things like that. And me as an African-American woman being in the legal practice, I have endured discrimination as a woman. I have endured being singled out as a woman, sexism as a woman, and I know what it feels like. So every time I hear them saying that they don't believe what the woman is saying, that Kavanaugh should be appointed, I don't think so. And this is my personal view. As you say, I'm the only woman on this panel, and I feel it. I feel like I have to go harder. But it's always been like that with the practice of law. In my entire practice, I've lost one case, seriously. And I've gone to appellate court and got it overturned. But I've always had to work harder, be harder, prove myself just because I was a woman. And even in this race right now, there are some things that are happening to me. I'm not saying for Lou, but, signs being taken down, things being said about me. And I just keep moving on and keep pushing on. But I know sometimes I just feel singled out as a woman. And what it means to me is that he does not need to go to the Supreme Court. We need to have someone who is fair, someone who does not have a scandal against them, and someone who's going to be for men and women. And him being on the Supreme Court is really scary. It scares me. So, and as a woman, it scares me, the rights of women that may be taken away. The biggest one, Roe versus Wade. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I want you guys to pray for me, because really, as a woman and being a woman on this panel, it's very tough. It's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy being in the political arena running as a woman, because they look at you and you're a woman. But I have to prove myself and prove myself harder. I have to work harder. I have to push harder. And, like I said, I'm feeling it with this race. But no power.
Thank you. Mr. Plaisance.
I think that the media is just so much giving Donald Trump so much publicity, and my whole thing is that vote him out. I mean, whatever you do, you vote him out. With Kavanaugh, I think that his positions and so forth, mainstream to me that he shouldn't be in the law or elected. And I can't practice in the United States Supreme Court, and it's real hard to get a writ approved. They always deny writs. So, you take it with a grain of salt, and I don't think you should be in it.
Thank you. Mr. Mason.
What does the confirmation of Kavanaugh mean for the future? I can tell you what I wish it means. I wish it means that folks will pay attention to the importance of the judicial branch of government, because that's the sleeper branch. We focus on the executive, the president. We focus on the legislative, who we elect for Senate and Congress, but we don't focus on the judicial branch enough. It's not enough public education out there about it. It's not enough information that's shared about what that branch entails. As I mentioned earlier, I referred to it earlier. They were taking civics out of the school. We have three important branches of government that makes America unique as opposed to any other place in the world. And the judicial branch is a very key branch. And so I hope that the confirmation of Kavanaugh enlightens people to get out, to vote, to not take it for granted, to not sleep on these things in the future. And I can tell you the technical things. We don't have 3 hours to go through the full lecture. I have gotten a lecture from Dean Chemerinsky, who's a constitutional law expert, who recently shared at our Federal Bar Association annual meeting about the impact before the Kavanaugh confirmation, about the impact based upon what he's projected to do as a Supreme Court justice, based on he's compared a lot to his mentor, which is Justice Kennedy, whose seat is being considered. He clerked for Justice Kennedy, but he's even more conservative, more right wing than Justice Kennedy was. So yes, it will have an impact. It will impact the status of the court and the balance of the court. But we've been here before. This isn't our first time being in the position we're in. We're resilient people. We're dealing with what we're dealing with now in the executive branch of government, and we will survive as Americans, as a society. We will survive this. So, but yes, it does mean a threat to Roe versus Wade. It does mean a threat to all the other important decisions, immigration. He has a record. He has a record that's been on display throughout the course of the last several months, really. So it's really, like I said, I would hope that it would be an enlightenment and awaken folks to the fact that their vote is so important. No, we don't vote for Supreme Court justices, but we vote for the executive branch individuals who make those decisions as to who those Supreme Court justices are. So that's what I hope would be the impact of the Kavanaugh confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pert.
His confirmation to the United States Supreme Court for justice is horrifying. It is a nightmare in and of itself. And I think what it shows and what it proved to the United States is that institutionalized sexism and racism is well alive within the United States Senate and within the executive branch. And I'm not just talking about the allegation that Dr. Ford made, which was as credible as any allegation I've ever heard, one of the most heart-wrenching testimonies I've ever heard. Obviously this happened. But it was his treatment to the U.S. senators. It was his treatment to the U.S. senators that showed the absolute disrespect for our process, for our government, and how dare anyone question him. Because he is a white male from the Northeast who has done everything he's supposed to do. He went to Yale. He was brought up wealthy. Of course he was able to get drunk when he wanted to. How dare you question him? And he was given that seat. And he was given that seat when everyone knew the truth. And they knew he lied under oath. And they knew something happened to that woman. And the fact that they have confirmed him and placed that man on the bench means he's taking his beliefs that he is better and that he is owed more. And he's going to take that, and that's what's going into those decisions. And what I was saying earlier when I talked about the federal court were the ones that struck down the laws. And we were talking about, they struck down the racial discrimination laws. They were the ones that protected abortion. They were the ones that made sure people were supposed to go to the schools they're supposed to go to. And now that's in danger. That's what it means to justice. And going back to what Mr. Mason said, absolutely we have to vote. Because we have to get these people out. Because until we do, our very beings and our days, what we do in our day in and day in lives, are in danger. And we're going to see threats to justice for a long time. That man's 50 years old. He's going to be there for another 40 years. Yep. Let that sink in. And so, yes, what it means, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare for justice. But it's something that we can all work towards together. And so, that's why you guys here are here on a Saints game. Because you're the ones that get people to vote. You're the ones that vote and talk and go on Facebook. So please keep fighting for us.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to thank all of you for offering up your gifts, skills, and talents to serve the awesome citizens of New Orleans Parish. Let's show our appreciation with a round of applause for our campus.
Thank you, Moderator Boyd. I want to give you a minute and a half for any closing remarks that you might have, keeping in mind that we are trying to get to a Saints game. So if you could give us a minute and a half for closing remarks, that'd be great, starting with Ms. Williams, please.
Again, I'm Marie Williams, running for Judge, Civil District Court, Division E, number 51 on the ballot. I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for you to vote for someone who has experience. I can just get on the bench, start running the docket. I know that we need to have the docket move along, not having cases stay in court for 4 or 5 years. I've been through it myself. I know how the process goes with having a court evaluator, custody evaluator, and I'm just asking for you to vote for someone with experience, because we need to start voting for people based on experience and what they know, not name, not recognition, not endorsement. People with experience, because that is what's going to help move the courts. Again, I'm Marie Williams, number 51 on the ballot, and thank you so much, and I'm asking for your prayers.
Thank you. Mr. Burke.
Oh, good. I'm not going to be last. All right. Because that's always the worst. Again, thank you all so much for being here tonight in the rain during a Saints game. I'm Richard Perk. I'm running for Civil District Court Judge, and I am ready to hit the ground running. I need your help. And with you, with all of you, we can do this together. Very often you've heard me tonight, I say we, and we're running. And I mean all of you. Because this isn't just me. It's never just one person that stands up. We're all in this together, and I think it's important that everybody knows that. And look, I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you all so much for having me. And then if you have any questions, I'm going to hang out for a bit, and I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mason.
Thank you. Thank you again for having us this evening and for being informed voters. And I ask that you please go out and share your thoughts of what you've seen tonight with your peers and your friends, especially those who say my vote doesn't count. I'm Omar Mason. One thing I want to talk about is anytime we turn on the news today, we're constantly reminded of the serious times that we live in. Unnecessary division, hatred, inequality, lack of fairness. The sad truth is that we've been here way too many times before. And in each moment of trial or consequence for our community, we've relied upon strong judges to interpret the law with fairness. So whether it's a family dealing with a difficult child custody or support issue, or whether it's an individual from humble means who's just been wronged, I promise to be that judge who will treat everyone with the utmost respect. I will run a professional and efficient court, and I will work every single day to help ensure that justice for all is a reality for all. I'm Omar Mason. I'm a leader for and from New Orleans, I'm a respected and experienced attorney, and I'm a proven servant leader. And I would love to have your vote to serve as your next judge of Civil District Court, Division E. And as for me, it's not about just sitting on a bench, but each and every day that I put on that robe, I promise to stand up for our community. Omar Mason is the name. I'm number 48 on your ballot. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Mr. Playson.
Yeah, I'm Kenneth Playson. It's number 50 on the ballot. Running for District Court, Division E. 28 years experience as an attorney. Can practice in Texas and Louisiana. I represent the Black Organization Police in civil service matters. I got a master's in employment law, and with all the accolades, I've been a good person. I have fundamental fairness in my heart and in my heart. And so I'm asking for your vote. But just get out there and vote. Just get out there and vote. Thank you.
Thank you all again. Please give our panelists a little round of applause.